colon polyps is one that affects a lot of people, such an important part of preventing bowel cancer.
So how common are polyps?
By the time someone reaches their 60s, there's about a 1 in 3 chance.
Why screen people with no symptoms?
Screening is about picking things up because they cause problems.
And the main test for bowel screening, the so-called Q-fit stool test.
It looks for invisible traces of blood in your stool, which can be a sign of polyps or early cancer. And that's where innovations like colon capsule endoscopy comes in. It often picks up more of the small and tiny polyps than colonoscopy does.
Well, let's talk polyps. How does size matter?
Green light polyps are the tiny ones. Amber light, lentil-sized polyps. It's the red light, blueberry sized polyps we really focus on.
Green means forget about the risk. Amber yellow means dial down the urgency for intervention or simply watch. And red means act. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of our podcasts where we try to make sense of all things gut related in a clear, practical way. I'm Tim, and I'm here with Professor Owen Epstein, a gastroenterologist and master explainer of all things colon. Prof, great to have you with us.
Tim, always good to be here. And today's topic, colon polyps, is one that affects a lot of people, even though most won't know it.
Right. So let's start with the basics. Before we dive into polyps, can you give us a quick tour of the digestive tract? Most of us have little idea what goes on inside.
Absolutely. Think of your digestive tract as a long, winding food processing highway. It's about 25 feet long in total. Obviously, it starts at the mouth where food enters, and it ends at the other end, known as the rectum. So think of it like this. Once you swallow food, the food slides down a muscular tunnel called the esophagus, which delivers it to your stomach. And the stomach is like a food blender. It breaks down food by its churning action, assisted by chemical additives like hydrochloric acid and an enzyme that it secretes called pepsin. And from there, the stomach flows into the small intestine, which is anything but small in length. In fact, it's about 20 feet long. And this is where most of the digestion and nutrient absorption happens. You can think of it as a high-end kitchen where all the raw materials are processed into a rich and tasty meal and absorbed for distribution to all the cells of our body. And then finally, the large intestine or colon, the part we're focusing on today. This is more like a composting and recycling unit. It's about 5 to 6 feet long, much wider than the small intestine, and shaped a bit like an upside-down horseshoe.
And its function?
Well, the colon reabsorbs water to firm up the stool. It consolidates and recycles some waste. And very importantly for most today, it's the most common place where polyps can form. These are the small growths on the inner lining of the colon, a bit like tiny mushrooms or bumps on the path. Most are harmless, but left unchecked, some turn into cancer over time.
So the colon is like the last stretch of the digestive journey, and where we need to watch for these little growths.
Yes, exactly. Understanding the map helps you understand why checking the colon for polyps is such an important part of preventing bowel cancer.
So how common are polyps?
They're pretty common. By the time someone reaches their 60s, there's about a 1 in 3 chance that they've got at least one polyp. Most people don't feel a thing. They're silent hitchhikers, really.
Well, if they're silent, how do we find them?
Well, mostly in the course of bowel cancer screening programs. These are public health initiatives that screens healthy individuals for blood in the stool. It's like checking under the bonnet during a car service. You might find that something needs attention even though the car seems to be running absolutely fine.
Well, before we dive deeper into polyps, let's talk about the whole idea of screening. Why screen people with no symptoms?
Great question. Screening is about picking things up because they cause problems. It's like detecting a spark before it becomes a fire. Bowel cancer takes years to develop, and screening helps us catch early changes or remove polyps before they ever turn dangerous.
And the main test for bowel screening is that little stool test we receive in the post, the so-called QFIT stool test.
Exactly. The QFIT, or quantitative fecal immunochemical test, is it's a simple at-home test that looks for invisible traces of blood in your stool, which can be a sign of polyps or early cancer.
And how accurate is it?
It's a great filter. If it's negative, the chance of anything serious is extremely low. If it's positive, it often doesn't mean polyps or cancer. It just means that we need to take a closer look.
And that closer look usually means colonoscopy.
Traditionally, yes. Colonoscopy allows us to see the entire colon and remove any polyps there and then. But it is moderately invasive, and it involves bowel cleansing, intravenous painkillers, some sedation. After the procedure, there's a recovery period, and there's always a very small risk of complications like bleeding or worst of all, perforation.
I see. So for myself, I suspect there are some anxieties around going forward for colonoscopy.
That's a very important question. Colonoscopy is a powerful tool. It allows us to see the inside of the colon directly and even remove polyps on the spot. But we must recognize that it's an intrusive test involving the insertion of a camera perched on the end of a long, thin, flexible tube through the back passage. So understandably, that can be a major barrier for many people.
Well, what kind of barriers are we talking about?
For some, it's just about embarrassment or fear. For others, it's cultural or religious beliefs about modesty. And of course, there are gender-related concerns too, as some may feel unduly exposed during the procedure. These concerns are really valid, and they contribute to much lower uptake of colonoscopy screening in certain communities.
So these individuals end up underserved.
Precisely. If someone feels too uncomfortable or anxious to go through with the test, they're less likely to get screened. And that means we miss the chance to catch polyps early, when they're harmless, but could much later become dangerous.
So there's a substantial population who might benefit from early detection, but are least likely to attend for all the reasons you mentioned.
Yes, that's the heart of the issue. We need to offer alternatives that are less invasive, more acceptable, and just as effective at identifying those who need further care. And that's where innovations like colon capsule endoscopy comes in, because access should never be dictated by discomfort, culture, or fear.
Well, what is colon capsule endoscopy?
Well, Tim, it's potentially it's a game changer. Instead of a scope, the patient swallows a small camera capsule the size of a jelly bean that takes a video of the whole digestive tract as it travels through the 25 feet from the mouth to the rectum. It's painless, sedation-free, and a good option for people considered at low risk and those who are reluctant or those seeking a procedure that is much gentler than traditional colonoscopy.
And it's good at spotting polyps.
Very good. In fact, it often picks up more of the small and tiny polyps than colonoscopy does.
Well, let's talk polyps. How does size matter?
Okay. Polyps are generally grouped by size. Tiny polyps, otherwise known as diminutive polyps, are 5 millimeters or less in size, or the size of a sesame seed. Small polyps are 6 to 9 millimeters, about the size of a lentil, and large polyps are 10 millimeters or more, or the size of a blueberry. Importantly, it's the large polyps that are more likely to become cancerous during a lifetime.
So not all polyps are a big deal.
Exactly. In the screening age group, tiny and small polyps are really very unlikely to cause problems in the person's lifetime. And they constitute up to 90% of polyps found on screening. And in large published studies of pathology, we can very confidently conclude that none of these diminutive or small polyps harbor cancer, and only a tiny number in the small group exhibit what is termed dysplasia, a feature recognized by pathologists under the microscope and is suggestive of a small but possible cancer risk in the future.
So if we hear the words colon polyp, there's no need to panic, and regarding the vast majority, no need to refer for urgent removal.
Yep, exactly. And it's so important we explain this clearly and carefully. One of the simplest ways to think about polyps is like a traffic light system. Green light polyps are the tiny ones. They carry no risk, and unless they are present in large numbers, which is unusual, the patient can be really reassured and even discharged. Then you have the amber light lentil-sized polyps. They measure between 6 and 9 millimeters in diameter. They might need a bit more attention, even though they're still at very low risk of developing into cancer in the lifetime of the screened individual. Most of the time, sensible advice and a calm, personalized follow-up plan is what's needed, not an urgent referral for colonoscopy.
So those in the amber group don't need to worry about cancer in the polyps, but presumably need a plan going forward.
Yes. Depending on the patient's age, comorbidities, and concurrent medical conditions, there's really the potential to develop a very personalized plan. Some might be anxious and, despite the science, would like the polyp removed, and these individuals can be reassured that there is no urgency about this, and a polypectomy can be planned for any suitable time in the future. They do, however, need to be aware that these small polyps can be very difficult to find at colonoscopy. And others may choose to undergo repeat stool FIT tests every 2 years or so, and perhaps a capsule recheck in about 3 years.
So it's the large blueberry-sized polyps that need more urgent attention.
Yes, and that's the importance of the traffic light classification. It's the red light blueberry-sized polyps we really focus on. These are the large ones that demand much more urgent consideration. And that's because they have a higher risk of developing into something more serious.
So this traffic light approach is especially helpful when polyps are found using minimally invasive filtering investigations, like colon capsule endoscopy. If a green or amber light polyp is discovered, it's not a crisis. It's a moment to reassure the patient straight away, offer good advice, and avoid unnecessary panic or referral for colonoscopy for urgent polypectomy.
The key message is simple: stay calm. Only the large red light polyps need fast action. For everything else, we can offer safe and thoughtful individualized care.
So in patients with low-risk fit stool tests, capsule is like a second filter, in other words. Green means forget about the risk. Amber yellow means dial down the urgency for intervention or simply watch. And red means act.
Spot on, Tim. It helps us avoid unnecessary colonoscopies. Instead of sending everyone down the more invasive path, we can now tailor the approach based on what we find.
So are there any risks with the capsule?
Very few. In very rare cases, the capsule might get stuck if there's a narrowing in the bowel. But even then, most pass with time, and if not, we can retrieve them with an endoscope. Also, if the capsule does get stuck, it's often the first clue that something abnormal has been going on prior to ingestion.
So in a way, it still helps with diagnosis.
Absolutely.
Well, back to colonoscopy. It's an increasingly scarce resource to be used when appropriate, not automatically or indiscriminately. Screening tools like QFIT and capsule endoscopy help identify who actually needs it.
Well, that's a sensible and evidence-based approach.
Well, to sum it all up, polyps are common in colon cancer screening populations, but by far the majority are small and harmless. And it's the chunky ones we worry about. For screening, start with QFIT, and if the result is in the lower range, it's reasonable to offer the camera capsule endoscopy option, and in many cases, this helps us decide who needs what and when.
Tim, in my judgment, that's right for most individuals. But of course, if the stool test, the FIT test, is strongly positive, it would obviously be sensible to go straight to colonoscopy, as there is a likelihood that biopsy or polyp removal will follow. And also perhaps a lower threshold is reasonable for individuals with a strong family history of colon cancer in young first-degree relatives. But people should feel informed and not frightened. By far the majority of polyps won't lead to cancer, and modern screening should help us focus only on the ones that really matter.
Reassuring stuff, Prof. Thanks for helping us understand how colon polyps fit into the big picture of bowel cancer prevention.
My pleasure, Tim. Until next time we meet.
And thanks to everyone for listening. Look after your gut.